Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravirajikacharya Asto Tarasata Sri Srimad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravirajikacharya Asto Tarasata Sri Srimad. His Divine Grace Shri Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavanini Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Kansas City Yatra Ki Jai, Shishi Gauranitai Ki Jai, Vaishnav Sangha Ki Jai, Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, Shishi Guru and Guranga, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hello, can you give me a Bhagavad Gita? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Canto 2, Chapter 7, entitled Scheduled Incarnations, Text 25. So, Vakshasthala, Sparsha, Rugna, Maha Indra, Vaha, Dantai, Vidambita, Kakup Jushaha, Udhahasam, Sadya, Asubi, Saha, Vineshtati, Darahartu, Vishpur Jitahai, Danushaha, Ucharata, Adhishanye, Vakshasthalas Pasadugna Mahendra Vaha, Tantar Vidambita Kukub Jusha Utahasam, Sadyo Subi Sahavineshati Darahartu, Vishpur Jitar Danusha Ucharato Dishanye, Vakshasta Stalas Pasharugna Mahendra Vaha, Dantar Vitambita Kukum Jusad Udhahasam, Sadyo Subi Sahavineshati Darahartur, Vishpurajitar Danusha Ucharato Dishanye, Vakshasthalas Pasarugna Rahendra Vaha, Dantar Vidambita Kukup Jusa Udhahasam, Sadyo Subi Sahavineshati Darahartur, Vishpurjitar Danusha Ucharato Dishanye. Please chant.
Akshasthala Sparsha Rugna Mahindra Vaha Tantair Vidambita Kakubjusha Udhahasam Sadyo Subhi Sahavineshati Dara Hartur Vispurjitar Danusha Ucharato Disanye.
Ladies, want to chat? Or meanings Vakshasthala, chest, Sparsha, touched by, Rugna, broken, Maha Indra, the king of heaven, Vaha, the conveyor, Dantai, by the trunk, Vidambita, illuminated, Kakopjushaha, all directions thus being served, Utahasam, overtaken by laughter, Sadhya, within no time, Asubi, by the life, Saha, along with, Vineshati, was killed, Dadaharto, of the one who kidnapped the wife, Vishpurjitai, by the tingling of the bow, Danusha, bow, Ucharata, strolling fast, Adhishanye, in the midst of the fighting soldiers of both sides. Translation: when Ravan was thus engaged in the battle, the trunk of the elephant which carried the king of heaven, Indra, broke in pieces, having collided with the chest of Ravan, and the scattered broken parts illuminated all directions. Ravana therefore felt proud of his prowess and began to loiter in the midst of the fighting soldiers, thinking himself the conqueror of all directions. But his laughter, overtaken by joy, along with his very air of life, suddenly ceased with the tingling sound of the bow of Ramachandra the personality of Godhead. So please repeat. When Ravan was engaged in the battle, the trunk of the elephant, which carried the king of heaven, Indra, broke in pieces, having collided with the chest of Ravana, and the scattered broken parts illuminated all directions. Ravana therefore felt proud of his prowess, and he began to loiter in the midst of the fighting soldiers, thinking himself the conqueror of all directions. But his laughter, overtaken by joy, along with his very air of life, suddenly ceased with the tingling sound of the bow of Ramachandra, personality of Godhead. Jai, purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. However powerful a living being may be, when he is condemned by God, no one can save him. And similarly, however weak one may be, if he is protected by the Lord, no one can annihilate him. Om Gyanatamyanda Shajanan Anjana Shalakaya Chakshru Ominitamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Svapanantikam. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. So, first, it's nice to be here. Prabhupada said he went back to India to bring all of his dancing white elephants, but here it's a bunch of dancing orange elephants. So it's very inspiring to see all the dancing orange elephants here in Kansas City, Dham, Rupanuga Vedic College. So in this section of the Bhagavatam, it's actually it's Lord Brahma is teaching Narada, so it gives us a sense, just like here we have at the beginning of the Parampara, Lord Brahma is there, and Narada Muni is there. So these are very special instructions and conversations that are being told. So Brahma in this chapter, which is entitled Scheduled Incarnations, he's explaining how the nature of the personality of Godhead is he appears in different ways and different times and even different forms throughout the history of the material worlds for the purpose of reestablishing, it describes in Bhagavad Gita, yada yada hi dharma sha glani bhaviti bhardata abhutanam adharma sha tanatmanam shidam yaham. Whenever and wherever there's a decline in religious practice and a predominant rise of irreligion, the Lord says, at that time I descend myself. So Krishna is coming in his different incarnations. Actually, incarnate's a kind of a funny word. Christians use that word like the idea of God becomes carnate, like in flesh. I think the actual original Latin word means in the flesh. So we don't have that understanding of the word incarnate, that the Lord actually appears or manifests himself in different ways. So the last so many verses, this is text 25, and for so many verses in this chapter, Brahma is talking about different avatars of the Lord. He mentions, most of them just get one verse. Like Parshuram, he mentions Lord Kapila, he mentions Matsya, he mentions Varaha, and they all get one or maybe two verses. So here, a little brief, very, very brief, at the same time, very poetic summary of Lord Ramachandra's advent in the world. And I think here there's 3 verses about Lord Ram. And then following this, it jumps to Lord Krishna. And there's about 9 verses are given to explain Lord Krishna's advent. And in the next chapters, Parikshit Maharaj, who's hearing this whole conversation, he's going to ask, please, Sukadeva Goswami, can you please expand all this? Tell me more. You've just touched on this a little bit. You repeated this conversation from the past to the summary, but I want to know more. And therefore, the whole rest of the Bhagavatam is full of, there's chapters and chapters of many of these different avatars or incarnations of the Lord, leading up to the 10th canto, where there's a whole canto about Krishna, chapters and chapters and volumes about Lord Krishna. And Prabhupada mentions many times, I was listening to a lecture just the other morning, about how sometimes, particularly in India, because that's where the literature historically is based, but probably be happening more and more in the West now, that people want to jump to the 10th canto. They want to hear about Krishna's pastimes because they don't understand the nature of the Lord. But his pastimes are very interesting, and some of them are misinterpreted in very mundane ways. But people want to go there, like elsewhere Prabhupada talks about how there's so many people, they want to talk about Krishna's dancing with the gopis, but they're not so interested in Krishna as fighting on the battle of Kurukshetra. And they separate. Like this is one part. Like I remember there was a man in our congregation in Washington, D.C. His idea was actually the opposite. But he said, I like Krishna of the Gita. I don't like Krishna of the Bhagavatam. So he was differentiating between the different pastimes of the Lord and miscalculating and thinking that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is a mundane person. So here Brahma is just giving you a very, very quick summary, touching on these different great personalities and avatars of the Lord. But then it's all going to be unpacked and distributed and given back in more detail in the future cantos. So these three principles are very important that Krishna emphasizes about why he comes. Just like again in Islamic traditions, I don't think they have a concept that God personally comes. But they understand that the messenger of God comes, and they're very adamant that they accept all the biblical kind of prophets and things like that. They accept Jesus. They have a slightly different interpretation. But then for them, the final one is Muhammad. Nobody comes after Muhammad. And one of the reasons there's big conflict between some of the branches of Islam and, say, the Ahmadiyas, there may be some Ahmadiyya mosques around here, they think Ahmadiyas are blasphemous because Ahmadiyas believe that their particular prophet, somebody that they follow, came after Muhammad, and for a lot of mainstream Muslims, that's completely heretical. Therefore, they're persecuted in places like Pakistan. They're terribly persecuted. We have the understanding, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, yada yada hi dharmasya, whenever and wherever there's a decline in religious practice, the spiritual life, he comes again and again and again and again and again. It's like a whole cyclical process. It's not like he comes once and you get one shot at it. And sometimes, like say among our Christian brothers and sisters, they have this idea, Jesus came, that's your one shot, you got one life, make it or break it, and if you don't accept Jesus, then you go to hell forever. And I remember kind of as a spiritual seeker thinking, well, that's not really attractive. You want me to surrender to this person that gives you one shot, and if you blow it, even though he loves you forever, he puts you in hell forever. I mean, even like my mom and dad are sometimes kind of harsh, but they never put me in my room forever. What to speak of setting it on fire? That's kind of harsh. So a lot of us, many people coming from a Judaic Christian background and exposure to biblical teachings kind of had a different conception that talks about God as God of love, but he must be more merciful than their book understands. Of course, a lot of modern Christians, they don't accept that idea that you go to hell forever, and they try to come up with some other ideas because their scripture's not so clear on it. But ours is very, very clear. Krishna says, whenever and wherever there's decline in religious practice and a predominant rise of every religion, I come myself. So here we see that he comes again and again and again and again and again. And Prabhupada explains a little bit in the purport. I'll just read part of this in the same verse 4:7. Prabhupada writes, the principles of the Bhagavad Gita were spoken to Arjuna, Krishna's teaching when Krishna himself came, and for that matter to other highly elevated persons, because Arjuna was highly advanced compared to ordinary persons in other parts of the world. 2 + 2 = 4 is a mathematical principle that is true both in the beginner's arithmetic class and in the advanced class as well. Still, there are higher and lower mathematics. In all incarnations of the Lord, therefore, the same principles are taught, but they appear to be higher and lower in varied circumstances. So this is a Vaishnava understanding of these verses, and even sometimes people will say there's conflicts between different scriptures, so doesn't that lead you to like nullify them all? You know, we meet people, I'm sure you go out and do book distribution, you meet people like that. They say, well, you know, your book says this, and their book says that, and their book says something else, so it's all nonsense. I don't accept any of it, because they get confused by what seem to be contradictions. But as Prabhupada is explaining here, the Vaishnava view is that Krishna is very merciful. We just look here, even in our parampara, so many great exalted personalities have come again and again and again. You know, these are various, the Western tradition would say prophets, and we would say these are Shaktivesh avatars and great carriers, great Diksha gurus and Siksha gurus and teachers within a parampara who are keeping the tradition alive, reminding people about what the purpose of life is. And sometimes looking at different traditions, there seems to be, or there is some degree of difference, but as Prabhupada is explaining here, because according to time and place, the message is different to help those people in that time and that place make some progress. Just like we see Srila Prabhupada, he was always teaching people about Krishna, but there was at least once, maybe a few times, when he was asked to speak to school children. And that's where he used, I don't know if he did it in other places too, one time he said, is there an intelligent boy in the room? And they all pointed to some kid with big, like Coke bottle glasses, they say, right? Like really thick glasses. He said, yeah, he's intelligent. He says, okay, bring him down. So he came up and stood next to Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, okay, point to your whatever, head. Point to your chest. Point to your knee. Point to yourself. He was all bewildered. And all the kids laughed, and Prabhupada said, thank you very much, and sat down. And then he wanted to explain, you're not the body. Because that was a nice way to make it understood to children. Now we know at other times Prabhupada spoke with professors of religion. He went to Ohio State. He went to Harvard. He spoke in some universities in India, so many places. So Prabhupada didn't sit there and say, is there an intelligent professor in the room? Dr. So-and-so, please come down. Where's your head? Where's your chest? Where's your knee? So according to different time, place, and circumstance, he presents the same teaching, but he does so according to the ability of the audience to understand. So in our Vaishnava tradition, despite a lot of modern ideas, a lot of people these days will say, well, there's no purpose in life. There's no end in life. There's no goal in life. And you're all wasting your time sitting here in the morning. It's a beautiful day. You ought to be outside fishing or something, you know? Because you're wasting the time you have. There should be, you know, you got up early first time, right, to come to the temple. So you should be sleeping in, and, you know. Some of your friends might say when you come home, where were you? I went to the temple. What? On a Monday morning? There's so many other things you could be doing. So because there's a sense that, no, there is no other purpose, just like they say, right? Eat, drink, and be merry. But in the Gita and elsewhere, Vaishnava acharyas, they teach that actually there is a purpose to this life. And Prabhupada comments a few places that the reason for people being so frustrated because they don't have an ultimate end. They don't really know what they're searching after. They don't know what they're going for. So how do you measure if you're making progress in life? If you don't know what the goal is, you don't know if you're going frontwards or backwards or around in a circle or whatever. It's like we're talking the other day, like a Ferris wheel. It goes up and then it goes down and then it goes up and then it goes down. It goes up and it goes down. In the material world, you go up and down and up and down and up and down, and then you die. And then people come and say, all the people that didn't like you come to your funeral and go, oh, he was such a nice person. Right? They try to think of something nice to say. I remember I had an uncle who died. His last name was Kauk, my mother's brother. And I remember going to the funeral, and they get a minister to come and say something. And I remember, like, the depth of his talk was that, oh, this man's name was Henry Kauk. It reminds me of Hauk, who was like a coach of some team at that time. I don't remember who, like a baseball team. That was the depth of his, here this person's died. There's a room full of people thinking about death. It's a chance to talk about, hey, everybody, wake up. It's happening to you soon, too. You're next in line. You better think about God. Because I know he tells everybody about baseball. I was just a young person starting to get a sense that there's some higher purpose in life and thinking, what a waste this is. How unfortunate it is that this is what they're doing. So we understand that there is a goal and there's a purpose in life, and those purposes are to end suffering. People are unhappy. They're unhappy in this world. There's so many unhappy people. And there's reminders practically every day of the nature of this world and what a dangerous place it is. A place is described as the ocean of birth and death. And there's floods and there's fires and there's hurricanes and there's tornadoes and so many abrupt things and so many other not so drastic problems that face people. So it's to end suffering and to awaken love for God and to go back to Him. And it's described here a couple verses ahead. The most effective process for that in this age, particularly, we're reading from the Bhagavatam. The last verse in this chapter says, the Lord's activities in association with His different energies should be described, appreciated, and heard in accordance with the teachings of the Supreme Lord. If this is done regularly, with devotion and respect, one is sure to get out of the illusory energy of the Lord. So again, this is Brahma teaching Narada Muni. And then in the next chapter, Parikshit Maharaj is additional questions to Sukadeva Goswami. Parikshit Maharaj makes a similar point. He says, persons who hear Srimad Bhagavatam regularly and are always taking the matter very seriously will have the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna manifested in their hearts within a short time. So this is a process that's given, especially in this age by Lord Chaitanya and in the Bhagavatam and also in the Gita, so many places by Acharyas. This process of hearing, that by hearing about Krishna and connecting with Krishna, then we can reawaken our relationship with Him. And Prabhupada gives a simple analogy. He says, just like sometimes a man may have amnesia and he gets hit in the head or something like that, he forgets who he is, where he is, but by the process of reminding him, sometimes they go back, say, this is your childhood home, do you remember this? Mm-hmm. This is your high school, mm-hmm. This is your wife, I don't remember, this is your kids. But by the process of reconnecting, they gradually start to wake up, oh, yeah, she looks a little familiar. Yeah, you were married for 30 years. Well, these are your kids. Oh, they look familiar. Yeah, they've been in your life for 29 years. Is your name Bob? No, it's Robert. Oh, yeah, Rob, yeah. And they start remembering. So we have that same relationship with Krishna, and we've forgotten it because we become conditioned by this material world. So by the hearing process, then we can gradually awaken our love for Krishna. So the goal is there, end all suffering, awaken our love for Krishna, and go back to Him. But it's very interesting because as devotees, at the same time, we have that goal, but at the same time, almost as a byproduct, by the process of bhakti, our lives become quite interesting and fun. Like Law was videoing the devotees that were jumping up and down. Maybe there's some gymnastic class going on someplace in Kansas City today, or maybe there's a Pilates class or something, or there's probably a few yoga classes going. People are stretching. There's not a whole lot of places where people are jumping up and down and laughing and singing in the morning in Kansas City. There may be a few. There's probably a couple. But there's not a whole lot. So generally, in materialistic people's mind, they're thinking, Jai Shishi Gonitai. They're thinking that the goal of life is to be happy and to enjoy. But that attempt at material happiness ends in frustration, because whatever benefit we get from material sensual gratification is temporary, it's limited, doesn't really satisfy us. But as devotees, you think about it, like we're said to renounce the world. So it's like, okay, renounce the world and then come here and eat the very best food. Like, is a cook in the room right now, or are they downstairs? Boy, can they hear? Haribo, all glories to the cook. That was a great feast last night. Were you here for the feast last night? Oh, you missed it. Okay, I don't know if breakfast is up to the standard of the Sunday feast, but it was a fantastic feast. So it's like, okay, Prabhupada says you have to conquer your tongue and then come and eat a 10-course feast, right? And We give up materialistic things, but we have beautiful music. I mean, sometimes devotees are better at music and not so good because the holy name is always there. It's said that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was somewhat tone deaf, so I don't know, his chanting was not melodious, but certainly extremely powerful, purifying the heart. And within our culture today, just even like our kids, I know where we live in Washington, D.C., they have something called Capital Kirtan, and the teenagers love it. They come and they chant 8, 10, 12, 14, 18 hours in a row. They don't want to stop. And this is the same age that most people that age, and at least America, they're running around and they're doing all kinds of materialistic things for gratification. But Hare Krishna kids, sometimes they're a little mixed in terms of, they're a little torn by both sides of the world, but they love to come together and chant Hare Krishna. And for hours, and for whole weekends. New Vrindavan has a big kirtan festival for a couple of days. The one in D.C. is nice because it's organized by youth and it's only done by youth. So we have great music. And we were just talking to some people the other day. It was your niece maybe was making that point about just in her, I think she was saying, short-term association with devotees, that Krishna people can be such nice friends for a whole lot of reasons. One of being which they talk about serious things. A lot of people in the world's like, how you doing? Fine. How you doing? Fine. Everything okay? Fine. How's the weather? Fine. How's your job? Fine. We talk to devotees like, how you doing? Well, life's kind of up and down. Yeah, because we've forgotten Krishna. You're right. What did you read yesterday about Krishna? Oh, I read some beautiful story about how he delivered so-and-so and so-and-so, and it really reminded me how I can take that to life because, sometimes we talk about real life situations. Again, we're not the only ones that do, but we do in a very wonderful depth. So we have great food, we have great music, we have great friends, great philosophy. I mean, sometimes I think, to get up every morning and to share conversations or listen to conversations about how do we become free from envy? How do we become free from greed? How do we become free from lust? How do we treat people like our brothers and our sisters in connection with Krishna? How do we not exploit animals? How do we not exploit the planet? And that's like what we talk about. We don't get up and talk about who won the game last night. Maybe we have some interest in those things, but it's not our main focus. And even then, it's funny how material world is always kind of, many ways, becoming more degraded. Now, the whole thing is, I know Maharaj has transcended all this, but he was a great sportsman in his youth. And now, people don't just watch sports, it's all about betting on sports. It's the big thing now is betting on sports. And even when the last 5 years, 10 years ago, I remember I was called for jury duty one time. And it was a guy got arrested for possession of drugs, which we found out was marijuana. And I remember I went up to the judge and said, because I went as a devotee, I thought I'd get kicked out right away, but I made it to the second cut. And they said, are there any questions? I raised my hand. So you walk up to the judge privately with the prosecuting attorney and the defense attorney. And I said, Your Honor, I'm just curious, if we find this man guilty, what's the punishment? Because in some states, he might go to jail for 10 years. In another state, maybe he'll just get probation. And, don't we need to know, how do we make a wise decision if we don't know what the punishment is? So that was a sufficient question to have me thrown out. Because the prosecuting attorney said, reject that one. Because we don't want to think about is this a fair punishment or not. We just want you just to decide, is he guilty or innocent or not. And if this person's going to be thinking in their mind, oh, this could be an unfair punishment, I don't want him on the jury, get rid of that guy. So I got to go home early. But today, you drive down the road and there's big billboards, right? We went by one called Ascend, which is really funny because, you take drugs and you think you're ascending, but actually you're descending. So they got the sign wrong. And they're all over the place. Signs but the other day I read some articles now they're starting to do studies that, actually people that smoke marijuana, there's a lot of depression amongst those people. And that actually is showing, although they said for years, I remember when I was young, marijuana doesn't lead to any other problems. They started to say, well, actually people that smoke marijuana, they do have a tendency to get into stronger drugs. So they're starting to say, all these problems, now that they've legalized it in so many places, and they're starting to realize, oh, there's additional problems. So devotees, we get to get rid of so many addictive behaviors. Like even Benjamin Franklin said, right? Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. So he'd be very pleased that Hare Krishnas are growing all over the United States. And even now, I mean, everything is such a nice life that Prabhupada's given us. I remember as a young brahmachari distributing books in Aspen, Colorado, which is quite like the very affluent place. And we were distributing books and camping out. We were so like we had, I guess we had a tent or something. So we get up in the morning before the sun comes up. We take bath. I think we actually took bath in the river. Back in the days, you could trust rivers and you could take bath in the rivers. And then we chanted japa. And then we went out to distribute books. And then we came home and like sat under the fire. And I can remember thinking, I was probably a 3 or 4 year devotee. I was thinking this is like so nice because I'm doing the same thing. These other people spend like a lot of money to come to Aspen, Colorado and enjoy the mountains and being under the stars and have a nice time. I'm doing exactly what they're doing in a purified way. You know, I'm camping out and eating, we're eating prasadam, of course. You know, we're cooking over the open fire, watching the stars, watching the sun go down, seeing the sun. We're doing all those things they do. We have the same pleasure. And then I get to go serve Krishna and worship Krishna and like tell people about Krishna. So they, wow, what a fortunate life. We get like all the benefits of what everybody's doing and all these additional things in so many nice ways. So therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita says, one who takes up this process of Krishna consciousness, they become joyful. We can see devotees jumping up and down and dancing. And one of my favorite quotes from Prabhupada, heard in a lecture one time, Prabhupada said, just become Krishna conscious and enjoy life with a thrill at every moment. And sometimes we experience that, sometimes we don't. Because of the nature modes of material nature, we get covered over in different ways. But when we hear about Krishna and these different pastimes, it's like we're reading about Lord Ramachandra right now, these few verses. When we hear about Krishna and how he's so kind that even though the individual souls, we chose to leave the spiritual world out of misuse of our independence, and yet he creates this whole material universe for us to act out all of our different desires. It's explained, right? We've all heard this number. 8,400,000 different species. Like you can imagine, if you went to like some amusement park and you said, what's happening here, right? They say, well, this is a big one. We got a roller coaster and a double roller coaster, and we got the like scare of this and the haunted house and blah, blah. We got like whatever, Disneyland, whatever they have, like 97 rides. Think, wow, you know. Well, Universal Studios making up, it's got, 137 rides or 400, wow. Krishna made an amusement park, it's got 8,400,000 different rides. You want to fly? Great, you can fly. You want to go to the ground? You go to the ground. You want to like be able to like, you see like squirrels, like we live in an apartment out the window, there's all kinds of, see these squirrels, like it's like Spider-Man, right? They go straight up. They can hang upside down. I can't do that. So I have it as if I had a desire, like, wow, I'd like to climb that tree too. I want to hang upside down. Poof, there you go. You get it. Great. Try it out. See if it works. See if it makes you happy. No, that one didn't quite make me happy. Okay, try this. Just like I was in Harinam, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware a few weeks ago. And a lot of people swimming and surfing and all that. And it's like, well, if you really like to play in the waves, human body's not so good for playing in the waves. You can do it for a short time. But after a while, your skin gets soggy, right? You can't stay in there for more than a few hours or a day or whatever. And so you can get a body that has perfect skin. You can stay in the water for years. Krishna's very kind. It's like whatever you want. Prabhupada says, if Krishna's so kind, you want to go to hell, he'll let you go to hell, right? Because of our misuse of our independence. But at the same time, he's so kind, as we're reading here, he comes again and again and again and again and again. Prabhupada writes in the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna spoke the whole Bhagavad Gita, and he comments in his purport, Prabhupada says that Krishna was prepared to speak the whole thing over again. He said, Arjuna, are your doubts now clear? Are you ready to decide what you want to do? And Prabhupada says, Krishna was ready to recite the whole Bhagavad Gita all over again. So that's the nature of our understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That just like if you have a friend, just imagine you have like a friend, maybe you don't see them so often, but when you get in trouble, that's the one person you know you can call. And you get in trouble and you call that friend, they drop everything, come to help you. And then they're like, are you okay? Yeah, I'm good. And then like 3 months later, you're in trouble again. You call the same friend. It's like, okay, I'll come help. You okay? You need help? Yeah, I need help. Okay, I'm there. And then they come again, 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 and then they come again. Are you okay? Have you figured out what you're doing wrong yet? Yeah, I think I can handle it on my own. Okay. You come again and again and again until finally it's like Krishna's like, okay, I got it, Lord. I can't do this on my own. I need to serve you, not my body, not my senses, not all these other things. So that's the nature. As revealed in our scripture by our acharyas, that's the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore it's described that devotees, as they awaken their love of Krishna, they're overwhelmed with that love. They're overwhelmed. I mean, sometimes we hear like in the spiritual world, right? Every step is a dance. Every word is a song. It's a little poetic, but just what a description of a place. And we get little slivers of taste of that, even our current level of mixed consciousness. So that's the gift that we're given. And as we know, Prabhupada said that if you're given a nice gift, you should try to share it. Just like Lord Chaitanya said, that it's explained, Chaitanya Charnari, he broke open the storehouse of love of Godhead, and he said, how can I share all this? I can't. I'm like a gardener. There's so many fruits. How can I share that? Please help me distribute these fruits. Help me share this love of God. So that's the only thing that the you also take up this mission. Just like I mentioned last night, when Prabhupada first and his guru said, you're educating young men, please spread the message of Lord Chaitanya. He was so anxious to see that happen. He didn't even wait for them to say, whatever, namaste, Swamiji, or anything like that, or what's your name, what college you attend, or what kind of work you do. None of that. Just so urgent. Take up this message. Take up this mission. Spread the message. So, in the context of Lord Ramachandra, Prabhupada, at least one time, he was describing about Lord Ram, and he was explaining how Lord Ramachandra, he sent Hanuman across the ocean to rescue Sita. And then Prabhupada said, and just in Lord Ramachandra's Leela, Hanuman and Lord Ram engaged a whole army of monkeys. So he said, I too have crossed the ocean to rescue Lakshmi for Narayan and to rescue Sita for Ram. And just as Lord Ram engaged an army of monkeys, he looked around the room at all of his followers. And they all laughed. Prabhupada also has his army of monkeys. So we're very happy to be part of Prabhupada's army of monkeys, just like he said, his first American attract people because he's big, white-bodied, mostly white-bodied, some black, but so is white and black elephants to attract people's attention. So Prabhupada said, so same comparison. So as devotees, we're very, very fortunate to have this opportunity to connect with Krishna, to have our lives, to know that this goal is there. Such a beautiful goal to gradually see ourselves awakening in our Krishna consciousness. At the same time, to see our lives being so happy and so pure. I remember like my parents, this is going way back now, but my parents, when I first became a devotee, they were really inimical. They didn't like it all. My father sent me a copy of Time magazine in a manila envelope. No letter inside, just a Time magazine. And on the cover, he wrote, "Come back to the real world." That was his perception of what I was doing. But a few years later, I had like a brother and sister. My sisters passed away. A few years later, they got to know what I was doing a little bit more. And, well, I can say in front of the Gaurnitai deities. I maybe wouldn't say in front of Radha Krishna, but Gaurnitai are more liberal. So my parents came to visit. We had an outreach center at college in Boulder, Colorado, University of Colorado. And the devotees that were there was 4 of us, and they cooked some really nice prasadam for my parents and kind of like wining and dining them, quote unquote, in a Krishna conscious way. And after dinner, the devotees asked my parents, so like, what do you tell your friends your son's doing? And I thought, oh God, I can't believe you're asking him that. I would never ask that question. So my mother got kind of embarrassed, and she was like, and again, please forgive me, but it's a historical story, so I'll give you the full-blown story, unedited. Again, because it's front of Gornitai, it's okay. And so they asked, my mother was like stumbling for words, well, what do you do? So my father, who was not a religious person at all, was like a 50s dad, kind of gruff and not the kind of father that really you could connect with very well. We had our issues throughout my life. But nonetheless, and he's the same person that sent me this Time magazine. Now we're like flash forward about 10 years later, and they asked, so Mr. Walker, what do you say to people? Now please consider this is not a religious man. He's a 50s dad. So, but in his terminology, what kind of strong endorsement is this? They asked him, what do you think of, what do you tell your son? He leaned up, he said, you know what I tell him? He said, no, what do you tell him? He said, I tell him my son joined the oldest damn religion in the world. You're supposed to laugh at that, everybody. So, in his mentality, he didn't understand much of spiritual life or Krishna consciousness, but he was appreciating the authenticity of the process. And in his gruff 50s dad language, that was like a huge endorsement. That was like a major change. And later they told me too, they said, we have 3 kids. My brother was a real estate developer, made a ton of money, lost it, made it again, whatever, was very wealthy for a while. And my sister was married, was a nurse and this, that. They told me, they said, actually, of our 3 kids, you're the happiest. They told me that. Although originally, come back to the real world. Then they start to understand, you're becoming a nice person, you're following your heart, you're very committed to what you're doing, you're trying to make the planet a better place. And this was, again, in the late 70s and 80s. It's not like many people understood the Krishna conscious movement. There were still thoughts of, you can't be a healthy vegetarian, there's no such thing, and anybody chants mantras must be brainwashed, and all kinds of crazy stuff. But still, they said, of all our kids, you're the happiest. So these are some of the kind of, you could almost say, byproducts of Krishna consciousness. So as devotees, we're realizing that, trying to just enjoy the world separately doesn't make us happy, but trying to be a devotee, trying to share with other people actually does. And therefore, Prabhupada had so much stress going on Harinam, he stressed book distribution, giving people the options so that they actually have a choice. Because without coming in contact with some spiritual knowledge, people don't have a choice. They're just constantly bombarded with various kinds of propaganda that are encouraging them one way or the other to seek some type of materialistic end. It may be more pious, it may be completely impious. Just like on Harinam downtown the other day, there was like some kind of mode of goodness shop with crystals or whatever, and right across the street from was some like really degraded bar. And right in the middle of the street were the Hare Krishnas with Lord Jagannath on the cart. So it was kind of interesting, like, okay, you can go to the little mode of goodness side, you can go definitely way down the mode of ignorance side, or you can realize none of this is really satisfying me, and you can go to Krishna's side. So that's the message that we have. We try to share with others. And of course, we also remember too, when people come to the temple, we always have to keep that in mind. When the fruit of our book distribution, our Harinam, is when people come to the temple. So we should always make sure we try to prioritize taking care of anybody that comes and making them feel welcome. Understanding that this is, we work so hard trying to distribute Prabhupada's books in the holy name and making sure that people feel that we appreciate you coming and we want you to be here and we want you to join in Lord Chaitanya's kirtan. That message is very important. So I can stop there if there's any questions or comments anybody has. I don't know what time you officially end. The Brahmachari ashram, you all focused on hearing and chanting, so you probably have 5, 6, 8-hour classes, I don't know. But then there's breakfast too, and Brahmachari's breakfast is very important too. I remember that. So any question, what time do we go? Was it overtime or we have some time for questions? Or take a few questions?
Anuttama Prabhu, thank you for enlightening us in Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada gives a very nice purport for this sloka, and I'm asking, what is the nature of the Lord's protection for his devotees? Because in the battle of Kurukshetra, so many millions of devotees were killed, and the Pandavas suffered so many tribulations. So what is the nature of God's protection for his devotees?
You're going to tell us, or you're asking?
Asking.
Obviously, you've given a lot of thought to that. What are your thoughts? And then I'll give my thoughts.
Anyone with a material body is destined to lose it sooner or later. But God's protection, according to my understanding, is he protects us from Maya. And he protects our devotional service. Even if we have to take another material body, our devotional service is guaranteed life after life. Even if one has to take the body of a deer like Maharaj Bharat.
Yeah, ultimately, certainly the ultimate protection that Krishna gives helps us reconnect with him. And we've somehow come in this temporary world. And there's a story Prabhupada tells. It's a nice story. He says that he said the householder is inside his home at night thinking, "Dear God, please protect my home and everything in it." The thief is outside the house, in the bush, in the dark, praying, "Dear God, please let me steal from this house." And I heard this lecture, and Prabhupada actually says, just see how hard Krishna's job is. The one soul says, "Let me steal." The other soul says, "Please don't steal from me." So somebody's saying, "Don't let me be exploited." Someone else is saying, "Let me exploit." Somebody else is saying, "Protect our country." Somebody else is saying, "Let me conquer that country." Somebody is saying, so many things, conflicting things. And therefore, it's like, I was never in the military, but I've heard some military people speak, and their view of the world is one war after another, and peacetime is the time between wars that you get prepared for the next one. You spend billions of dollars, you have to figure out the newest weapons, and you have to keep ahead of the other people, make sure your planes are faster than their planes, and your sword's sharper than their sword, and all those different kind of things. Why? Because the mentality in the material world is ultimately just to exploit the resources of the world for my personal benefit at everybody else's cost. And again, there's there's the mode of goodness is there. Some people are more selfless and trying to help other people. But even then, ultimately, just like I was reading some information, they were saying that historically, in the 60s and the 70s, there was a big movement for black liberation to help black-bodied people in America. They achieved a lot of good things, some good people, right? I think we drove down Martin Luther King Boulevard on the way here. But it's also a fact that the women's liberation movement came in part out of black liberation movement, because so many women were exploited in the black liberation movement. And I remember when I was in college, the big thing was we didn't eat any lettuce, because, well, a lot of us, because we were trying to support Cesar Chavez, you remember that name, who was doing all kinds of leading labor union efforts to help the migrant farm workers. So, okay, like there's the migrant farm workers being exploited, and there's black people in this country for sure being exploited, and there's women being exploited, and then you can go and you can join the Save the Whale group, or some people are trying to save the apes, and some people are trying to save this, and some people are trying to work with disabled children, and some people are trying to work with exploitation of people in the cities, and other, just like, what was that sign we drove by? Yeah, black something. Black, we'll have to look for it on the way back. We're driving through the farmlands, right? And I live in the suburbs, more or less city. And there was a big billboard, protect Missouri from the black-nosed or something vultures. Contact us for help. And I was saying, black something? Anybody know about the black? I guess there's some problem they have in the agriculture area. There's all these certain kind of new vulture that's not new, but it's new, a new problem. Enough they got a big billboard. And I was thinking, wow, the material world is so crazy. It's just one form of problems after another. So here you come out in the farmlands, there's no traffic, and there's not a huge amount of crime, and, there's not the noise of the urban environment, and you don't hear fire engines go off every night, but you still got the black-tipped something vultures. So the world, from start to finish, the vision of those who see beyond time, who see beyond this temporary life, their vision is, as Krishna says, from the topmost planet down to the lowest, all are places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death take place. Which sounds really pessimistic. Wow, you people just like, wow, are you pessimistic? No. It's like if you go to a doctor, and the doctor says, well, you have some serious disease here, and you need surgery. And you say, no, doctor, I don't think so. I don't think it's so serious. I don't think I need surgery. I think you should just, give me a pill, make it go away, right? But the optimistic person says, let me understand what the real problems are and try to fix it so that I can lead a healthy life. So this is the message. And we're reading about all these avatars, these incarnations. They come again and again and again and again and again, the same message. This is not your home. It's the same in the other traditions that are there in this age, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism. For sure, Buddhism, I was just in some interfaith thing. Like the Buddhists, it's all about overcome suffering, overcome suffering, overcome suffering. And you think like, who's overcoming suffering? Because they don't believe in the soul. So who's overcoming the suffering? Well, I had a Buddhist friend, was a professor, Len Pinto at the University of Colorado. We had him for dinner one night. We're talking to him, said, so we have one question. And again, Buddhism is wonderful. It's helping elevate a lot of people. But the reason we're Vaishnavas is because we find a few more answers here. So we asking this one professor, university professor, said, Professor Pinto, so you're a Buddhist. In Buddhism, it says that there's reincarnation, and you're trying to get free from the suffering of reincarnation, but you don't believe in the soul. So what's reincarnating? His answer was, that's a very good question. That was his answer. That's a very good question. But they have an understanding there's suffering, and we have to get out of the suffering. So the Buddhists talk about the suffering. Other traditions talk about the suffering. We also talk about the suffering. But why the suffering? Because the foolish, rebellious soul came into this world, which Krishna created, and he said, okay, we're going to put all the bad kids in one sandbox. So you find yourself in the sandbox with a bunch of bad kids, and one of them's punching you, one of them's throwing sand, and the other one's like, hitting you over the head, and the other one's pinching the girls, and the other one's doing this and doing that, and trying to jump on us. And it's like, you're like, this sandbox is terrible. Please, teacher, help me. I'm like, yeah, we can help you. Act right, get out of the sandbox. No, I want to stay in the sandbox. Okay, you're in the sandbox. So when we say Krishna protects us, the ultimate protection is he's going to help us get out of the troublesome material world. And there may be short-term things, like we all, we have this experience. There may be short-term difficulties that are really disturbing us, and we should pray to Krishna. It's not we shouldn't pray to Krishna, but just, Krishna's there. We should pray to Krishna. We should ultimately, the main prayer is, please, Krishna, please engage in your service. But if there's some disturbance, I pray to Krishna all the time, please help my mind be more peaceful so I can serve you more nicely. Please, help me do this and do that so that I can serve you more nicely. So those are okay. And at the same time, ultimately, we know what you said. His protection is helping us get out of the material world. That's his real protection. That's how we really, really want to be protected. And, I had a situation, I got the mic, so I'll talk about my experience. I'm Grahasta, moved to Washington, D.C. to open the communications office, was told there's no money, so figure it out. So I said, okay, we'll start a business. So my wife and I started a business, very profitable for about 20 years, gave for us, a pretty good amount of money to ISKCON, about at least some years, 75%. You're supposed to give at least 10. We gave 75% to try to help Prabhu's movement, so it was going nicely. And then Krishna shut it down. This happened, and that happened, and this happened, and that happened. I'm like doing all, like, Prabhupada, this is your business. So I'm trying this and trying that, trying this and trying that. And open a new store, move to this spot, move to that spot, try to renegotiate and bring in lawyers and sue people and try not to be sued. And it just like crumbled. Like you read in Prabhupada's life, he had some big businesses and they just shut down. he was trying all kinds of stuff, and he just shut down. So we prayed, pray to, please Krishna, please keep this business going so I can serve you. Please help this new, store work so I can serve you. Please get this crooked landlord off my back so I can serve you. Please cure this disease so I can serve you. Please give some money so I can serve you. Please help me be healthy. Please help me, please help my child or my spouse or my friends so we can serve you. And sometimes Krishna has a different way of teaching us. That's part of the surrender. People ask me all the time, people that know me say, so was it a problem losing your business? Like, well, yeah, I kind of liked it. I just wrote somebody yesterday. There was like, can you do this and this and this? Like, I have no money. And I wrote him and said, it was a lot more fun having money. People ask, can you give a donation? Sure, $5,000 for this or that or whatever, 5 cents, whatever, for this, that. There was no, he knows what's best. He said, okay, time's up. Now you got to surrender in a different way. Like, okay, Gaurnita, you're the boss. Like some of the challenges you're facing, a little different, but geographic challenge, it's like, okay, you're the boss. And we have faith. So Arjuna's faith was, Krishna, I don't want to fight this battle. It's a lose-lose situation. There's no way this is going to come out good. And Krishna said, your viewpoint is messed up. You got to change your view. You got to learn to see things differently. And when we see things differently, we see, oh, actually, this is Krishna's mercy. I mean, why did Krishna take Prabhupada away after 84 years? Why didn't he live for 104 years? Gosh, could we have used him for another 20 years? There's a few questions and challenges and problems we face. You feel like, oh, Prabhupada was just physically here. He'd straighten it out in a minute. You guys are wrong. You guys are right. Everybody cooperate, surrender. He didn't do that because we got to work it out on our own. It's like we got ourselves into this mess. We have to get ourselves out of this mess by the grace of Guru and Krishna. So that protection, it's just like a parent. Sometimes the parent's protection is always there. But it doesn't mean the child always gets what they want. In the ideal situation, these days sometimes parents aren't so good, but generally parents really, they give anything for their kids. But that doesn't mean they're going to give the child what they think is good for them, because the child sometimes doesn't know, right? I really, really want to marry this guy. Everybody says, no, don't do it. Don't. No, I really, really want to marry. Don't do it. He's not a good guy. I really want to marry this guy. Okay. 3 years later, what happened? I'm divorced. He was such a bum. I really want to put my, there's so many examples. So many examples. So, Krishna's protection. He's seeing things from a different perspective. And we have to pray, dear Krishna, please, just like Arjuna, give me divine eyes. I want to see you in your universal form. Help me know. I want to know what you want me to do. And at the end, he said, okay, I'll do it for you. And a really interesting thing is, Bhagavad Gita ends with Arjuna saying, I surrender. But you read the whole Mahabharata, there was at least a couple more times Arjuna got bewildered all over again. And Krishna had to tell him, hey, keep fighting. Don't get distracted. So it's not so easy. But again, we got ourselves into this mess. Krishna's trying to help us get out. That's a very deep question. It's a tough one to explain sometimes to people, but it's not an elevator speech, quick answer, I think, and a lot of different perspectives on that. But that's, I think, some thoughts that I have on that. Is that okay? Any other questions? You're our guest. Any question or comment, anything you'd like to bring up? Ask one irrelevant question, and we can talk more during breakfast. How's that? By the way, I was noticing your japa chanting is really focused.
I try to.
Yeah, gee whiz, I wish I was as focused. You sat in one place like a tree for I don't know how long. That's like really nice.
So during this discussion you mentioned, one thing that's not clear for me is that we forgot God or Krishna. And that at one point it's like, how did we know God at one point and how could you turn away from God? If you've already experienced something that great, how could you turn away from it?
Wow. That's a really deep question. When I was in charge of that center I mentioned in Boulder, Colorado, there was one devotee every day asks the same question in class in a different variety. How is it possible if we were completely, in one sense, if we're with God and we're happy with God, how is it we turned away? And actually it's deep in many ways, because there's even, sometimes among Vaishnavas, there's like this debate. How could you have been with Krishna and then left him? Prabhupada gives a description. He uses this term, it is the, what's the term? It's a misuse of our free will. I'm trying to remember what the particular words he used, but we have free will and we misused it. And it's interesting because there's a parable. Have you studied the Bible a little bit at all? A little bit? Okay, well, have you ever heard of the prodigal son? Okay, so there's a parable that Jesus told where there's a young man, he's living with his father, and he just decides, I want to go out on my own. I want to be on my own. So he leaves his father's household, and he goes through all kinds of struggles and ends up being someplace totally miserable, and then he realizes that was a mistake. And the particular line, as I recall, he says, I'd be better off as a slave in my father's kingdom than a so-called free man out here. So he goes back, and there's a big, huge celebration, and the father completely embraces him and welcomes him back. So that's the description that's given by our acharyas. And it's particularly interesting for a few things. One is, I was just listening to a lecture the other day, and Prabhu was saying, we all have our eternal relationship with Krishna. We just forgotten it. So, and he says elsewhere in this famous record he made that Krishna consciousness is not an artificial imposition on the mind, but it's actually there, it's in us. We actually have an identity. We have an eternal relationship with Krishna. But, again, some of this term is right there, but I can't grab it. We have the causeless, that is, causeless unwillingness to surrender. In other words, it's not because, like, say, okay, I go out the door and I trip. Well, what caused that? Well, somebody left their shoes in the middle of the floor. Or something like that, the pipes leaked. Well, why? Because such and such broke. So that's the cause. It's causeless, meaning there's no other cause other than us, that we have that free will. That's the special manifestation of the free will of the soul, is to surrender to God, or be with God, or to try to make it on our own. And it's described a little painfully to hear. We're part of the minority that made the wrong choice. So even though there's like billions and trillions of living entities and even like stars in the universe, somehow it's unimaginable for my tiny brain populated with jivas that have left the spiritual world. But that's a very insignificant part. And Prabhupada also, sometimes when you'd be asked that question, he would say, if you're on a ship and somehow you fell off and you're in the ocean, don't worry so much about how did I slip and get into the water. Just get out of the boat. You can figure out the details later. Sometimes he would answer that question like that. But the bottom thing is causes unwillingness to surrender, that we just blew it. And that's why in part it's really important to be thinking about how Krishna is such, our understanding of God. I was a camp counselor once at a religious summer camp. And I remember going out on the beach one night and shaking my fist and saying, if you're God, I don't want anything to do with you. This world stinks. I was in college. There's too much suffering. There's this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem. And you made the whole thing. I don't want anything to do with it. I reject you. Get out of my life. Don't ever come into my life again. And then about 2 years later, I realized I was suffering so much, maybe I needed some help. And I started realizing all the religious people, the spiritual people, made a lot more sense than all the mundane philosophers, and there was a lot more information here than I imagined, and realized that I was maybe I was the cause of the problem. And also I tried to, quote, help the world in so many ways, and realized that I'm as bad as anybody else. I'm trying to help this cause, and meanwhile I'm trying to exploit this person. And I'm trying to help these people, but actually part of the reason I'm doing this because wow, I got my picture in the paper, and people are thinking I'm really cool, and wow, isn't that great? And I realize, wait, that's what causes all the trouble in the first place. People thinking they're special, and I'll step on you to get to the top, and maybe I am the cause of all these problems, and maybe I need a different way of dealing with this, and maybe I need to clean my heart. And where's the best place to do that? What's the best process to do that? There may be many, but what seems to work? At the very least, how can I live and not eat the animals? Right? Everywhere else out there, they eat the animals. I worked in a bar as a bartender. It was like, our books that describes mode of passion. Something that seems like nectar in the beginning and like, is it poison at the end. So I worked in this college bar, all young people, beautiful young women, handsome young men, and lots of money to spend. And everybody's like, party, party, party. But then like, the bar would close. I was there for maybe 2-3 months, and then I quit that and became a devotee. But the bar would close at 2 o'clock, and they'd break out the free drinks and the pizza, and everybody played foosball and pool and this and that. Foosball. It was actually called foosball. That was a Freudian slip. Foosball. And they'd stay till like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. It was like heaven. Like, wow, this is like fantastic. And after like the first week, it's like, it's getting a little tiring. Like after the second week, it's like, ugh. And by the third week, like, I just want to go home and go sleep. And I started noticing the new employees were all like, wow, this is great. But all the people that done it for, I was like, I'm going home. So the same thing that seemed to promise so much pleasure and happiness, it just wears really thin. Nectar turns to poison. And then all the things that seem a little tough, like, wow, you people get up in the morning early before the sun, you chant your meditation for 2 hours. Wow, that sounds really tough. Then you realize, no, actually, that actually becomes really much more happy, like you were experiencing. You feel some sense of peace and happiness like that. So then we realized, well, maybe I did make a mistake, and maybe I can undo that mistake. So that's a long answer to a really good question, but thank you for that. So we should stop and have breakfast before it's lunchtime. Okay? Okay. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Lord Ramachandra ki jai.